Okay, so Matt Mr. X Morello was involved in the release, but he didn't really do anything. It was all, the league operations and the people behind the league decided actually this year to release the player contract status for all players in the league. This is the first time that we've known any of this information officially, apart from what people have said on Twitter and this kind of stuff. But they released a lot of new interesting information. So we're going to go through it and we're going to take a look at what they said. Now, the free agency is set to start on Monday, October 7th, which, as of recording this video, is 2 days from now. So a bunch of this stuff will have already changed. I'm pretty sure that some of the people that are listed as free agents right now, I'm just going to highlight Aim God at the moment because he's the first person I saw that's a free agent, but I'm not talking specifically about him. Will have already been signed, sometimes by the same organization that they left from. So I know that might get a little confusing, but I'm going to explain it later. Now, players are designated in the following contract categories. I'm going to explain these first. Free agent, which means they can sign with any team starting Monday. What that means is, when you first signed with the Overwatch League, all of the contracts for 2018, as far as I'm aware, were a 1+1. What that means is your first year is guaranteed the salary, right? And your second year, it's up to the team whether or not they want to pick you up. So actually, I was going to say let's talk about Dogman because his face is right in front of us, but Dogman wasn't even in the 2018 season. But let's imagine he was, because then we've got a purely hypothetical scenario. So say Atlanta Reign were in the 2018 season and they signed Dogman, it would have had to be a 1+1 contract. So anybody that did not renegotiate at the beginning of 2019 would become a free agent now, because their contract would expire. They would have had that guaranteed year from year one. Then the team picked up the option for year two at the end of 2019, and they would become a free agent. That means that they can sign with any team. They're open to any offers. They don't have to trade. They don't have to hit a certain contract amount, this kind of stuff. But it does mean in certain situations that people will be free agents just because their contract expired. And that doesn't mean that they're about to go to another team. So that's a pretty different distinction to have, right? Just because you're a free agent doesn't mean you're looking for another team. You might be open to exploring other options, but you're not necessarily going to a different team. You could get re-signed by exactly the same team. So other people are under contract, which means that they still have a guaranteed contract for the 2020 season at least. So some of these people that are under contract might be under contract through 2021 as well, or at least they might have an option for 2021. Yo, Orbital, thank you very much for the tier 1 sub. Or the team option. Now, what team option means is that, let's use our hypothetical 2018 Dogman if he made it into the Overwatch League a year early. He would have had his guaranteed salary. Let's say he was on minimum salary, 50K. Again, no idea how much Dogman earns. So say he's on his minimum salary, 50K. That is guaranteed. As far as I'm aware, even if the team cuts him or trades him, he still has to be paid that amount of money for that year, right? So it's not like you can get out of paying players just by cutting them or sending... Well, you can get out of it by trading them to another team, but then that team has to agree to pay his salary, right? The team option means that the next year around, say you've got a 1+1 like everybody did in 2018, when it comes to the 2019 season, the team can decide whether or not they want to pay him the same amount again. And that's purely on the team. Dogman doesn't have to agree to it. He can retire if he'd like to. In which case, I don't believe they have to pay any of his contract. He just literally retires, and that's a way of players being able to get out of their contracts. But I think after you retire, there's a whole year where you can't be signed back to the league or something like that. And then you could be traded to another team or whatever. But those are the options that the player has. The team could either sign them for renew their contract for the same amount, or they could renegotiate. So there's a bunch of people still on a team option. For example, the entirety of the Atlanta Reign are on this team option, which means that in 2019, when this team came into the league as an expansion team, they signed, actually, there's one exception, but the majority of the team is on the team option, which means that they all signed 1+1 contracts. They had the first year guaranteed with whatever salary they had, and in 2019, the Atlanta Reign's organization can choose whether or not they want to keep these players. What does that mean? It means if they want Daco for the same amount that they paid his salary in the year one, they can do it. If they want to renegotiate and pay him more, why would they want to pay him more? Because you get the player for longer. You can guarantee that he stays on your team for longer by renegotiating a new contract. It's also just a goodwill thing as well. You want to keep the player around, you want to keep them happy, so you might renegotiate to pay them a little bit more. But any of these players could also be dropped, and they wouldn't have to have their salaries paid next year, because it's the team's option to up the contract or not. Dr. Skeletal, thank you for the Twitch Prime too. But before we jump on to actually going through the teams, let's take a look at the averages as well, because this is the first time we've ever heard any information about player salaries and stuff apart from what's been leaked or reported on previously, like, for example, the whole Sinatra 150k number. So, in 2019, the average player earned 114k. Now, 16k of that is from prize pool winnings, which I believe was like 5 million this year or something. I'm not really sure how the average of this ended up working out because the numbers don't quite make sense when I do the math on it, but okay, let's just believe them. But that number isn't really going to change the prize pool winnings. Obviously, if you win more, you get more money. So the average of prize pool winnings doesn't really make that much sense, right? If you are just dog shit, then you aren't getting any of that prize money. So that's very much like a meritocracy-based payment. But what we're really interested in is this 97k base salary. Again, signing bonuses will only apply to a couple of players. That's why the average, the mean, is so low, is because when you take the overall amount of signing bonus money and divide it by the amount of players, you get a very low number. But what actually happened in reality is that a few people got fairly decent signing bonuses. Most people probably don't get any signing bonuses. So when you add up all the zeros from everything, it ends up being a low average. But the actual amount of signing bonuses was probably somewhere, like a bunch of people getting somewhere between 5 and 10k, something like that. I don't exactly know the numbers. But let's take a look at this base salary, because this is the important thing. The median base salary, so the way that the median is calculated for anybody that doesn't really know, you line them all up, you order them from the lowest to the highest, and you find which one is in the middle. So what that does is, you've got a load of outliers maybe on the high end, and you've got a couple of people on the minimum salary of 50k. You find what's in the middle. Now, medians tend to be a much better way of averaging things when you have a few people at the top that have wildly different and much larger salaries, which is why the mean salary ended up being larger. So there are probably, what we can gather from this is that there are the same amount of people underneath 80k as there are above 80k, right? But the people above 80k are probably quite a lot above 80k, and they've dragged the overall average, the mean average, up. So when we are thinking about people like Sinatra and these kind of players, a lot of those players will have pretty decent salaries. They'll be earning, 150, sometimes 200k salaries that have been reported on in the league. But that's not everybody. Those are the superstar players, the players that people really want to build around, this kind of shit. And in reality, there's a lot of players that are still, somewhere between 50 and 80k. And also, I think the amount of people that are actually on 50k probably isn't that many. Like, I think even Huck came out last year and said something like none of his players, and he's renowned for, paying some of the least in the league. None of his players were on 50k, which I know, like, some of them are probably on like 55, some of them are probably on like 60, pretty low to the league minimum, but, a little bit higher. And I think a lot of players will be oscillating around this kind of zone. Literally half of the players in the league are somewhere between 50k and 80k. And that's their salary. Another thing to take away from this, because I saw there was a Reddit thread about the salary and people thinking that isn't really very much. Their rent gets paid for, which is enormous amounts in Los Angeles, which is where these players have been living for the last 2 years. And also, a lot of teams have team chefs. They have their travel paid for and stuff like that. They have their just day-to-day lives kind of taken care of. They live in team houses, some of them, and so they're just kind of looked after. Their amount of expenditure is very little, which makes their disposable income very large and ends up turning what would be like an 80k salary, which is, it's a pretty decent salary in Los Angeles, but it's nowhere near an enormous salary. It turns that into, wow, this is actually really comfortable living. I'm making decent money. They also get benefits as well, right? So if you take out the stuff that you would be paying on health insurance and stuff like that, it ain't that bad. They haven't got it bad. And also the Overwatch League is a very new league as well.